We like to call it the Supernatural Hour. And now, our hosts.
Hey, this is Raven. Welcome to the Supernatural Hour. I forgot what we were doing.
This is Chad. Welcome to the Supernatural Hour also.
And this is Emmett, who's just happy to be here.
He's probably the only one of us that can talk right now. Holy cow.
And it takes effort sometimes, too, lately.
Yeah, Jess and Dot can't be with us tonight, so we will see them later.
So, main topic, we moving on to the Paris Catacombs?
Yes, and I'm looking at, I typed up this little agenda, and I did this in kind of a hurry. It's Paris Catacombs, but look right there, main topic.
Paris Catacombs.
Paris Catacombs. I can't talk or spell.
Well, sometimes the letter C is pronounced like an S, so.
So there's this meme that I saw kicking around the other day, and have you seen those memes where there's the brain talking to the person?
Right.
And the brain's like, "Are you sleepy?" And the person's like, "Yes." And then the brain says, "Well, before you go to sleep, just remember that every C in the phrase Pacific Ocean is pronounced differently." There's like 3 of them, and they're pronounced differently. I wish you could see them right now.
That's funny, yeah. Oh, man.
So I don't know. That Paris, it could be Paris. I'm just being creative in my spelling. The way some people spell names these days. Hey.
That's true. I know where we're going tonight, so let's do it.
Okay, so Paris Catacombs. I've been to Paris like 3 times. I've never been to the catacombs.
That kind of surprises me, that if you've been to Paris 3 times, you haven't been to the catacombs.
Well, at the times that I was in Paris, ghost hunting was not as forefront in my mind as it is now. Let's just put it that way.
But that is one of the major attractions in Paris.
Well, okay, so the 3 times I was in Paris. First time I was there with my Dutch friend who thought that driving 5 hours from Holland to Paris was insane. I'm like, that's from my house to Vegas. I do that 3 or 4 times a year sometimes.
And if you throw in the Moab trips, it's another 3 more.
Right. I'm like, get in the car, I'll drive. She thought I was absolutely insane. So I kind of made her go.
I don't know that she was wrong.
Yeah, there it is. So, and then the other 2 times were actually just really long layovers.
Mm-hmm.
And so not enough time to go do a whole lot.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, but what they did say is like 5.5 million people go through the catacombs every year.
Now, that's just the tourism figures?
No.
Because
my bad.
Very popular. Like, kids do raves down there.
Yeah, 550,000.
That's still impressive. Half a million people.
Yeah, 550,000, not 500 million. I've got the 500 million mixed up with the number of dead bodies that are down there, and that's actually between 6 and 7,000.
In the world goes through the
at
Paris
once.
Catacombs. Yeah. Same year. It's like a pilgrimage. Okay. No, but still, 500,000 people a year.
Yeah,
is impressive.
Yeah, it's one of the major tourist attractions, and it was a major tourist attraction, really from the get-go. But let's kind of start with what
with the get-go.
Let's start with the get-go. We're kind of jumping in on the second chapter here.
History.
So Paris Catacombs. Basically, what happened is in Paris they were burying people. The oldest cemetery there, they say it was 1,000 years old.
At the time, it was over 1,000 years old.
And very active. They finally had to close it because there was no room. They weren't embalming people, and there are a lot of mass graves, and it became kind of a public hazard. The doctors in the area, this would have been in the mid-1700s, all these diseases were popping up, and medicine was advanced enough at the time that they said, we don't think that these stinky, bloated, decomposing, and in some cases not so decomposing bodies are not really good for public health.
You think?
Yeah, we got to do something.
And there was even some situations where the bodies had been buried, so when I say so high, so deep, in such masses that some of the basement walls of the buildings around were collapsing in from the pressure of the bodies expanding and the gases. And so it's like all of a sudden you're there in your basement and the wall comes down and dead bodies come rolling in.
It sounds like a poltergeist movie.
How macabre is that?
Can you imagine sitting there eating dinner, watching TV, all of a sudden, ah!
I don't think H.P. Lovecraft or Edgar Allan Poe could come up with something like that.
No, that
That's
is just creepy.
ugh.
Ugh. Anyway, so they're just trying to decide what to do with with the situation, and they'd had a cave in, and they remembered that a while back they had been quarrying limestone underneath Paris City roads since like the Roman days.
Yeah, and they weren't at the time. It wasn't Paris City because Paris, the quarries were out away from the city, but the city then expanded over those. So in the 1700s, Paris was over these old limestone mines that were used to, for things like Notre Dame Cathedral and I mean all of the building of Paris.
Right. And there was collapses, and the collapses got to be so frequent, and people, dying. I had it written down. One of the kings, King
Louis the 15th.
Louis the somebody or other, finally said no more quarrying.
That's even further back with the no more quarrying. Okay.
And just they said no, you can't do it anymore. It's too dangerous. And they went down and kind of shored up what was there so that the city wouldn't collapse. Well, they had forgotten about these, and there was a little collapse somewhere, and they went, oh, hey.
And at the same time, Louis the 15th was trying to figure out what to do with all these corpses and these dead bodies and things that, they're having a problem with. He had put an edict out that they couldn't bury any more people in the city of Paris because of the problems. There's just no place to put them.
Right.
There was, literally millions and millions of people buried and like 700,000, people in the city. But literally millions of corpses.
Yeah, I think the total corpse count in the catacombs is 5 to 6 million.
Yeah, I've heard 6
Over
to
how
7.
many years? How many hundreds of years?
I think they said, it took 12 years to move everybody out of the surrounding cemeteries into the catacombs.
And
I mean, even if you stretch that out over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, that's still like truckloads of bodies going in there.
Right.
It is.
Some of the
Constantly.
cemeteries went back over 1,000 years.
Yeah, the oldest one is the one they started with, the one right in the center, and it was called Saint Innocence
Something like that.
Cemetery, and it's the one that was over 1,000 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
So think of all of the bodies over 1,000 years, being piled up. When I say piled up, buried, trying to, dispose of the bodies. And you've got that. And then you've got all of the different cemeteries all throughout Paris.
Well, you got to wonder if you went down there with an EVP recorder, if you'd hear nothing but like a stadium sounds from all the spirits.
Right? So
Jeez.
They're doing a wave.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing about that. Got their cheerleaders down there. There's an interesting thing about that. So they went to move these, and the church, it just says the church, I'm assuming the Catholic Church
was against it.
And so the Catholic Church wasn't really hot on it, and just the general public wasn't too hot on it. They actually had to move these bodies at night, so that people didn't get all riotous about it. And then it did say that there was a preacher, I thought I wrote it down, there was a priest who would do some prayers as they were moving the bodies, to kind of hopefully keep everybody at peace.
Mm-hmm.
So...
Yeah, the church looked at it as a disturbing a grave or a desecration.
Okay, I get that. But, you can see where this is exactly the kind of thing, we even experience today where, issues of faith bang heads with
the needs of the society.
Yeah, the public interest. So
public health in this case.
It's happened forever. It's going to keep happening forever.
Yep. So basically, they first started moving the bodies, and in everything I read, it said the bones. In 1785, they had a brief break during the Revolution, and then they started up again after the Revolution and kept going until about 1860.
And these weren't individual crypts. These were just literally piles of bones, right? In some cases.
Well, and there was a lot more than just bones, too, because the bodies had been stacked so heavily in these cemeteries, and the air was so bad. There wasn't a lot of oxygen for actual decomposition to take place. That the bodies waxified, that the bodies turned into that kind of that gelatinous corpse wax that they talk about. And that was part of the reason that they had to get rid of them, is because they weren't decomposing to just bones. They were...
It's like human amber or something.
Yeah, sticky, not the hard amber that's been fossilized, but the sticky stuff. And there was one report that I was listening to, and they talked about it, and there were some people that really benefited from these body movements where they moved the bodies from the graveyards to the catacombs. And that was the candlestick makers and the soap makers.
Oh,
Ew.
gee.
Because they used that corpse body wax, the fats from those corpses, to make candles and to make soaps.
My skin's never been so soft.
Oh, that is just disgusting.
Thank you, Grandpa.
So as you light your candle and take in your bath, you got dead people goo on you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, so there, it's like with everything. In all change, there's winners and losers.
My life's not so bad.
You don't have to take a bath with corpse soap.
I'm never going to be able to light a candle or use bar soap. I haven't used bar soap in a long time, but still. Ew.
Oh, that's the best soap in the world.
So soft, so creamy.
Oh, okay, you French people are just very innovative. Ew.
Oh, gee.
Okay. Ew.
That's the best thing I've heard all day.
Oh, you need to get out more,
Yeah, really. Life ain't so bad.
right? So, well, yeah, but, going back to the bodies, when they took them out, at first they just kind of unceremoniously just dumped them down these, they called them wells. And then after the wells would get so deep, workers would go down there and move them off into what they called galleries, which I'm assuming is just wider open spaces where they'd quarried the limestone. But they were just in there in piles.
Mm-hmm.
And it was around the time of Louis XVI. He hired a fellow named... I took notes, and I don't know where all my notes are. Some French dude. Oh, right here. Inspector Hericard de Thury. He went down there, and with his workers, they took the bones and they made them pretty. They, stacked them up. And if you look at pictures,
With patterns.
yeah, the skulls, and they'd have all the femurs lined up. It's really
5 feet of femurs, 3 feet of skulls, 5 more feet of femurs, 3 feet of skulls.
yeah, and they'd make
patterns.
They'd make patterns like hearts and aside from the fact that they were actual human bones of living people, which is kind of creepy, they're quite pretty.
Quite artistic.
It's very artistic. But I can just
Bone art
I
from
know.
Mattel.
I can just
Kids,
imagine.
Tell your parents. Yeah. I want to do this actually with chicken bones now on a small scale because it sounds so artsy.
You can do your own miniature replica of the Paris catacombs.
Now, this is totally aside, okay, and off topic, but I got to put it in here. When I was young, I had a friend who kept lizards in a terrarium, and they just would grow all over his house. They were everywhere. They'd come back at night in their terrarium, and he'd done it his whole life. And when they died, he desiccated them and kept the bones, right? He
Okay.
had a little plastic box full of little lizard bones. Totally cool. Skulls, everything, all the bones.
He had his own little Paris catacombs for his
Essentially,
lizards.
yeah. And I said, what are you going to do with that? And he said, well, one day he wants to super glue them into little miniature dinosaur skeletons and make a little miniature dinosaur museum.
Okay.
So
See, if you did it with chicken bones, you could call it the poultry catacombs.
there you go. You pulled it back.
Yes,
It's
I
gone
did.
full circle. Yep.
Yeah,
The poultry
and
catacombs.
you go to like KFC and go through their trash to get extra bones.
I think we can do this.
Then we can make
I can't
candles and soap out of the chicken wax.
There you go.
Oh, this is just
Yeah.
A
so
new
gross.
business opportunity.
Okay, we are so off in the weeds.
Is that going to
Chicken
be a new
soap
one
is-
in our advanced paranormal shop?
No, folks, we are not going to start selling dead carcass
Rendered
wax.
fat soap. Yeah.
Ew.
Although I don't know, I know that there's been, barrels of stuff concocted for for this hobby, and it's gonna go on. So we'll see what happens.
So I find it interesting. They first started opening up these catacombs in 1809 to the public. So they were still moving bones in,
From the 1780s.
they were still moving bones because, it says they took a break, but they were moving bones from 1840 to 1860 again.
Yeah,
So it
during
was
the
officially permitted and sanctioned to tour these.
Yep.
yeah during that little break, they were making more candidates to go down there with the guillotine and
Well, it does say it became a popular burial place. So I think some of the bones
renewable
down
resource.
there, exactly. Some of
Yeah.
the bones down there are newer than older. I mean, there's some down
No.
there that are thousands of years old, but there's
Emperor Napoleon III is down there.
well,
Wow.
yeah. Charles X, Francis I. I mean, it became a popular burial site. It was kind of the place to be buried.
Well, and where you can't be buried in a graveyard in Paris because they've closed them all down, that's probably where you go.
Yep. Nowadays, it's attached to a Carnavalet museum, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. If you French or no French, I'm sorry. And in 2017 and 2019, respectively, there's a new bookstore and a new entrance in the Ledoux House. So they're continuing to upgrade it and make it nice. It has been open for tourists off and on, sometimes by appointment, sometimes closed down because I guess people were going down there stealing bones. What kind of creepo is doing that?
Bone collectors like myself.
I don't know. I think I'll take some of these.
I've got a
human
chicken
bones
project to get
home.
going on here.
I don't know, but as of right now, I mean, for several years it's been opened, and you just pretty much have to buy a ticket.
But that's the public area, because the
Yes.
public area is only like 1.5 or 2 miles of the catacombs.
Yes.
The catacombs go for 350 kilometers, which is 217 miles
Right.
under the city, and they're off limits to everybody except for in these certain areas like the ostiary, the bone ostiary, where the thing is. Other than that, people aren't supposed to go there. It's trespassing.
Right.
So does the city of the Paris government run this, or is it private concessionaires, or do you know how it's structured?
You know what? I didn't get into, and I didn't see anything about that.
I bet it's got to be the Paris city government.
I would think so. It's being overseen by the king at the time.
So do you know who the catacombs are owned by?
No.
Emmett, any idea who the catacombs
I have
are owned by?
no clue, but I'm waiting with bated breath.
They are owned by the people that owns the property above them.
Wow.
Oh.
Okay, and the Paris government did that for a very good reason.
To share the
Because if your
Share
house
the blame.
if the house collapses into the catacombs or into the hole, you're responsible for what's
It's
under
your-
your house.
it's your own
it's your
fault.
responsibility.
So if you
That's
own
incredibly
that,
smart.
okay.
Which makes it so that it's trespassing if people are going in the catacombs without permission. When you decide to buy your house in Paris or your commercial property or whatever, you're buying everything that's below you, and you are now responsible for it. So
if you own the catacombs below your property, can you go there?
you could probably tunnel down and go into your portion of the catacombs. Some people use them as wine cellars. Some people use them, again, it's just a big cavern underneath. And some of these caverns are huge, can handle thousands of people. They're big, caverns that have been hollowed out. Some of them are just hallways and those kinds of things. But it's
I did see the Ghost Adventures episode with Zach Baggins running around down there. Baggins.
I don't know that I've seen that episode.
They are incredibly extensive. He
Oh,
actually
yeah.
got he contacted a local to guide him down there, and she took him through there. A couple of them did, and they're just, you could easily get lost very quickly down there. They're huge.
So there is a thing called, I was looking through my notes. So right here, it says by 1785, the tunnels were stable because they went down and stabilized them so the city wouldn't collapse in. And it said the remains of dead Parisians were being dug up every night and transferred into them. A priest accompanied every wagon load of remains in order to chant the Catholic Office of the Dead prayer cycle to ensure that the remains remained at peace. What I was looking for, there is a term, and I want to make sure I get it right. Cataphiles. Do you know what a cataphile is?
Somebody who hangs out in the catacombs.
Yes. So they actually hang out there illegally. They only let you into a certain portion because they are so extensive and so massive. People have gotten lost.
But there are a lot of people that are catacomb explorers that do go down there illegally, these cataphiles and other people.
Yes. Yep.
I've heard they actually host illegal
Raves?
parties down there. Yeah, huge
With-
parties.
With or thousands of people.
Yes.
Exactly.
Not hundreds of thousands. Me
It's
with my
gotta
numbers.
It's got to be an open secret, though. Something that big.
Yeah.
How
Oh,
come I
yeah.
just saw 800 people go down that manhole? over there?
Right? It's like, yeah.
That's a
Why
weird
not?
line.
Yeah. In World War II, they were used extensively by the French resistance.
They were also
Wow.
used by the Nazis.
Yep. So, yeah, they're just, you got 200 plus miles of catacombs. They probably didn't bump into each other. They also were used for bootlegging. And more recently, the more recent cataphiles apparently was during the 2020 lockdowns. Teenagers would go down there because they had to get out. They had to socialize. They would sneak down in the catacombs just for something to do.
Doing what teenagers do.
Yep.
Yeah, I saw one report about a girl that died down there, got lost from her group. They were a little drunk and she wandered off, and they found her about several months later. Somebody found her, someone else, another one of these.
Considerably thinner.
Yeah.
Well, see, and that's a hard one to explain. I was down there wandering around when I shouldn't have, and I found someone else who wandered around where they shouldn't have. And
Yeah, and it's like, and could you describe exactly where it was?
No. Nope, I can't.
And how did you get there?
No, I'm sure yeah. Well, they found her, and they apparently reported her to authorities, so I guess they could get to her somehow.
Yeah, they got her, but it's like I say, people,
Leave your little trail of breadcrumbs.
hundreds of miles of, over 200 miles of possible places to get lost. There's the story of the guy, there's a hospital, I think we talked about it, where he got lost in the 1780s or 1790s. He was at a hospital and there was an entrance down there, and he was a gatekeeper and a key, the key master at the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And he went down there and, took his candle down, and apparently it got blown out and he couldn't do it and he got lost. They found him like 14 years later, and they were able to identify him by the keys that he had.
Yeah, that's we have a few. Surprisingly, there were not very many ghost stories that I could find on the internet about the catacombs. Even though I'm sure with that many bodies, I'm sure there are spirits of the bodies that are there, and it probably attracts negative spirits to hang down there too. It may attract positive spirits too. I don't want to make it sound really negative. But it was actually during the French Revolution. The man's name was Philibert Apser, and he was a doorman at the hospital. And his job, I don't know if it was his job, but this particular mission, why he went down there, was to get a certain liquor from a cellar. And he actually entered the catacombs accidentally. He was just going down to the cellar, made a wrong turn.
Got lost.
And he just had a single candle. He wasn't expecting to go on a 250-mile trek or however long it was. He was going to go get the liquor. I'll go get the liquor.
Well, and you think about that. You're down there in the dark. There's no electricity, literally. You're down there with your candle, and for some reason you drop it or it goes out, and now you are in pitch black, and there's no way to know
Where to go.
which way to turn.
Yep, it does say they believe that he may have been intoxicated.
Yeah, probably didn't help.
And his
That's
candle.
probably what it took for him to go down there in the first place.
Right, his candle went out and everything went black, and he was found 11 years later by a group of cataphiles. And like you said, they identified him by his hospital keyring, but they buried him there.
Where he fell.
And there's actually a tombstone describing his death, and it says cataphiles and catacomb folklorists say that every November 3rd, Filbert's ghost haunts the labyrinth of the catacombs. So, if it's every November 3rd, probably the day that he died, that's more likely a residual haunting.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, but just think how, strange that would be to be down in a place like that, and there's just literally, miles and miles and miles, and you don't know which way to go because there's no light at all.
No, there would be no light. That would be one of the blackest blacks,
Yeah,
the darkest darks. I don't want to sound like
you would
him.
be feeling hallways and hoping you didn't come to a fork. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And the first one that you get wrong, it's done.
Yeah, hopefully someone comes looking for you, but the chances of them finding you are pretty slim. All right.
You're on your own. Yep.
Exactly. Ooh, that just gives me the creeps.
I'm sure you've been in that kind of black before. I've did that at Timpanogos Cave. When you go
Yes.
up there on that thing, then they take you down into the middle of it, and then they turn off the lights, and it's just
Yep.
like you don't see anything,
Yeah, there's
Nothing.
absolutely nothing.
and it's
It's eerie.
disorienting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's another story. So it was in the early 1990s. There was a group of cataphiles, and not all cataphiles are necessarily illegal. There are people who study and explore them on a regular basis, so we probably should make that a little clear.
Historians.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm sure they've got to get licensed and registered and stuff. So one day in the early 1990s, they were walking around in some of the dark chambers of the ossuary, kind of right there kind of near a public place. It wasn't in the public place, near the public place. And they found a video camera on the ground. So, they looked at the video camera. It still had footage on it. And as they were watching the footage on this camera, they just heard some really disturbing noises. And, from the video that they were watching, they could tell that the man holding the camera was lost and he had no idea how to get out, because they could hear him, kind of his little personal monologue. And as they continued watching this footage, they could tell that the man was just kind of going mad. Just so panicked that he was losing his senses in these underground tunnels, which I can totally understand. And the video just ends very abruptly when the man drops the camera to the ground. And to this day, no one knows who he was or if he was able to get out alive. A lot of people think that the movie As Above, So Below was inspired by this.
I think I've heard this before. This is actually a famous story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there's another kind of story that's kind of linked to the video camera story. It's a famous legend of the Paris Catacombs, and it has it that something terrifying happens in the burial site after midnight, which is ghost hunters. We know that the witching hour is 3 in the morning, right? So
That's after midnight.
Mm-hmm. So it basically says, keep your wits about you in the catacombs if you're there after midnight. My guess would be general public would not be there because I'm sure the hours don't go that late. I could be wrong. I did notice that it was 13 euros to get in. I didn't notice the hours.
13 year. What's that? Like 25, 30 bucks?
Something like
Something
that,
like that.
probably.
Yeah.
According to this legend, that's when the walls begin to speak, which makes total sense. If there's any spirits down there, that's when they're going to get chatty. It said that disembodied voices will try to persuade you to venture deeper into the catacombs until you can't find your way out. Wow. So, yeah, that one was not surprising to me. I thought, later you are the chattier spirits.
And that gets more into the paranormal bent of things than just kind of the historical.
Mm-hmm. So, in 2004, a group of police officers were exploring part of the Paris catacombs that were restricted from public access. And they uncovered some really weird things. They found a PA system playing pre-recorded guard dog barking. Then they found 3,000 square feet of galleries wired for phones using pirated electricity. They also found a bar, living area, workshop, lounge, and even a cinema with room to seat 20 people. And the cinema seats had been carved into the stone of the catacombs. And the creepiest part, they said, was that they discovered cameras on the ceilings recording them. A few days later, the police went back to the area with a larger team to investigate further, but everything they'd discovered from the phone lines to the catacombs had vanished. And the only thing that remained was a note that read, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it in French, but it just read, "Don't search."
Wow.
So it's like, ooh, what is that? The other thing is, it just said that there were a lot of missing persons. They've had a lot of people that have just wandered off into these catacombs and never been seen again. Whether they got out, I would think if they got out, they would no longer be missing.
That makes sense to me.
I mean, people aren't going to report them missing if
They're not missing.
they're not missing anymore. So, there's that. However, even though there weren't a whole lot of stories like these to tell that I could find on the internet, there are a lot of pictures.
Documented evidence type pictures?
Yeah,
or-
so if you go in, like on Google, and if you just type in Paris Catacombs, ghost stories, there are a lot of pictures that people have taken. Since they've opened, visitors have reported seeing orbs, voices, strange shadows. So there's definitely activity. There's just, for whatever reason, not a whole lot of stories about it. So basically, I really want to go to the catacombs. It sounds amazing.
As a visitor.
As a visitor, yeah. Just I want to come back out of the catacombs, basically. And then, Chad and I are actually going to be in France of June of 2024. We'll be in Normandy, which is a ways away from Paris. But I don't know, maybe we need to somehow get to Paris and go through the catacombs
That would be cool.
while we're there.
I think you can get anywhere in France on the train effortlessly these days.
Yeah, so we might have to, once I get my agenda, what's going on.
See what our other options are
It's a pipe band trip. It's not just something that we're planning, because if we were just going to go, we would plan that in. But yeah, we will be going there with a group, and we'll kind of have to see what kind of time we have. But definitely going to have to try to pop down there.
Yeah, that would be fun.
All right. Well, stay haunting
Yippee-yi-yay.
stay haunting my spooky friends.
Have a great evening.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Supernatural Hour at AdvancedParanormal.com. The Supernatural Hour is part of the Radio Ronin network, found at RadioRonin.com. Copyright by Advanced Paranormal Services.